Welcome to Parent Solution. And today we have here with us Dr. Sarah Wayland. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Filza.
Sarah has done PhD in cognitive psychology. She's a speaker, parent coach, and certified relationship developmental intervention consultant. So good to have you here. And Sarah is going to talk about how to give parenting to an autistic children. So tell us more about it. I mean, everything about it. Autism, the rate of autism is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us everything.
Well, that would take like a really long time, but yeah. I'll tell you some of I don't know. So you're so right. The rate of autism is increasing. We aren't quite sure why. We don't know if we understand it better, so we can diagnose more accurately now. I think there's some evidence that environmental factors can have an impact. So for example, warming, but also, toxins in the environment, more allergens in the environment, these things can have an impact too. Then there's just the way the modern world works now. People don't sit still as much, and I'm sorry, people sit still more and they're not out running around, which is like something
offices.
Yeah, but kids, even kids like in classes, there's more instruction time and less time at recess. I don't know, is that true in India?
Yes, it's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yep. And so there isn't as much time to play freely with other children. So time is more structured. And it turns out that free play with other children is actually really important for developing the ability both to regulate your own emotions and also to understand how to interact with other kids. You have to have that practice, and kids just do goofy things and they make mistakes and their friends are like, why did you do that? and they just learn through the course of those interactions. And with less and less playtime and more time devoted to academics, our kids aren't getting those very helpful skills for how to, be with other people. And then when you have the pandemic, factored into that too, where kids who are, who were young during the pandemic, I mean, we've been through this international trauma really of dealing with that. And so these are all, all things that are having an impact. So yeah, the causes leading to it are complex and multi-layered. And there's also genetic component. So certain kinds of autism, can be linked to genetic profile.
Okay.
So some kids, it's just hereditary. And so, for example, in my family, my father has autism and both my sons have autism. And when we look back through the family tree, we can see that it definitely, comes down that family tree for my family. Other people, there's no history of autism and their child is autistic for some reason. And so, maybe it's that the gene predisposed you to be more sensitive to these factors I was talking about, or maybe it's that there was some mutation, for that particular person. So there are lots of reasons why autism might develop. And I'll just speak a little bit about co-occurring conditions which can lead to autism. So a lot of times autistic children, when they're very little babies, just younger than 6 months, they may be ill, like they may be colicky, they may have ear infections, they may cry a lot. And their own discomfort gets in the way of them being able to bond with their parent. And so the parents, are trying so hard to comfort their child, but they just can't because who knows what's wrong? You're trying everything, but you don't know. And so that causes the parents to interact with their kids in different ways and the kids to interact with their parents in different ways, which is because of something that isn't about autism at all, right? But it has an impact on some very early skills we learn. So little babies are learning things like playing peekaboo. So, you hide your face, you reveal your face, and everybody laughs because it's fun, right? But if a child is in pain, they're not going to pay attention to invitations to have these little interactions, right? So they cry, the parents stop trying to have these playful interactions, and the babies can't respond to it because they're in so much pain. And so that can lead to sort of a cascading problem with development, where because they don't develop these early skills like looking at somebody, to see how they're feeling, if you don't develop that skill very early on, then it just has ripple effects as you get older. So one of the things that we talk about, you mentioned in the introduction, I do something called relationship development intervention, RDI, and we talk about how these the capacity to interact with other people, to think flexibly, these happen in a developmental sequence. So
Okay.
if you don't learn that looking at somebody is important to understanding how they're feeling, or noticing the impact you're having on them, recognizing that if you have a different way of being, that they might react differently, right? So understanding that your behavior impacts how other people react to you, then it's very hard for all the other stuff to come into play. And so what we do is we say, okay, we do an assessment. It's called a relationship development assessment, where we figure out what is problematic for this child, right? What, I hate to break in, but I think I need to let my cat out. She's meowing. So
Yeah.
we have, go ahead,
mhm.
go ahead.
No, you continue.
So I was just going to say, we have this developmental sequence, and what we do is we try to figure out, like, where did that developmental path, go from, what most kids are doing to what happens in autism? Where did that divergence happen, and what skills do they have in place, and what skills are they still missing? And then we can go back in and work with the child to figure out, okay, how do I help them understand the importance of noticing how somebody is holding their body, right? Like, how do I help them understand that, and then use it in a meaningful way for them? And so that's sort of the what we do. But there's a deeper question here, which is how much of this is remediable, and how much is just the way the brain ends up getting wired, and you have to work with it. Most people believe that autism is a difference in how the brain is wired. Now, brains are plastic, right? So brains can rewire themselves in the face of new information within limits. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Can I ask you this question? If you were saying this transformation of brain, will it happen only in the developmental age, or even after that?
After that, for sure, it can happen anytime. But like I said, the different parts of the brain, so when your baby is born, your brain is basically just a mush of neurons, right? They're not organized in any way. It's just a mush of neurons. And over time, with exposure to the environment, they organize into different parts of the brain. So you have, parts of your brain that are devoted to vision, and parts of your brain that are devoted to processing sounds and motor, parts of your brain that help you plan and organize things. So the neurons organize themselves based on what exposure is happening in the environment. And that wiring and so on gets, it's very easy to change things when the child, pretty much until about age 10. But even if you don't know until age 10 that something is going on, even if you don't start any of the remediation until 10, the brain is still plastic and it can still learn. It just takes longer. It's harder to rewire. So the fact of the matter is that we are learning until the day we die, and our brains are always changing and always reorganizing on the basis of experience till the day we die. And so we can always make changes, but there are some fundamental things that are different from person to person that you may have a harder time changing. But there are biological differences that can make it hard for a child to, learn to talk or learn to interact with other people in, this way I was describing earlier. But it's not impossible. It's just difficult. So one of the things that I think is so important for parents to remember is it's never too late. Never. It's never too late. So you can always say, you know what? I didn't know until now, but now I'm going to give you what you need to learn what you need to know.
Yeah.
Always.
So as you're talking about intervention and diagnosis, what is the earliest time where we parents can start getting their children diagnosed, whether they have autism or not? What's the exact age?
That is actually a very tricky question, because one of the things about autism is it has a developmental course that looks different for different people. So I call them flavors of autism. There are some flavors of autism where it's apparent from a very young age. I have had children that I have worked with who were 6 months old, who had just gotten a diagnosis of autism. That's pretty young. There's some work showing that even looking at how babies hold, like whether they can hold their heads up, so their neck muscle strength, you can diagnose possible autism at 6 weeks based on that, right? Most
Okay.
kids who have more serious, so more, we say there are more vulnerabilities. So they have more challenges that they are navigating. Those kids will often get diagnosed between 2 and 3 years of age. And it's partly because developmentally they're chugging along and they're doing okay. And around that age, the brain is starting to undergo a massive reorganization. So there are these periods. So, toddlers, that's one time the brain is reorganizing. Another time is during adolescence. So teenagers, and another time is actually right after your baby is born. So women's brains massively reorganize right after they have their children. So there are these developmental periods where the reorganization is happening, and it happens in a genetically programmed way. But if you haven't set the foundation for that to happen in, the way that you think it's going to happen, and I wish I knew like what I meant by that, but all I can say is during that time, the reorganization seems to trigger a process that either goes well or doesn't go well. And, toddlers are so frustrated and they know what they want, they can't communicate it. And they're always like trying to figure out like how to communicate, whatever it is they need. And what happens in autism is that, they may not navigate that process in the same way that a non-autistic person would. And so their brain develops in a different way. You can restore that other developmental trajectory, but you have to actually address whatever the problems were that led to that divergence in development. So a lot of kids will get developed then. Those are often the kids with more vulnerabilities. So more things that are hard for them, more motor control issues, more difficulty with self-regulation, things like that. There's another time when a lot of kids get diagnosed, which tends to be around ages 8 to 10. And the reason is because during that time, the social world starts getting more complex. So kids interacting with each other, it just gets more complicated. There's more nonverbal cues. There's more say one thing but mean another.
Yeah.
That starts happening a lot. And so the kids who can't figure that out, who are often autistic, get diagnosed during that period of time. Then sometimes those are the two, probably the most common, but there are plenty of people who don't get diagnosed until they're, 12 or 18. Like you'll see, older kids who were missed because they're using all their thinking power to figure out how to navigate those situations. And of course, as we develop, the social world gets more and more complicated. And at some point, they just reach their threshold of being able to compensate through pure intellect, right?
Yeah.
And so this book that I mentioned to you that I've just published, this is for people who actually are getting diagnosed later with autism because they were they were figuring out all the things they needed to do and they were able to handle it, but then the world just got more complicated than they were able to really process and deal with.
Okay, so being an autistic mom, do you think autism is scary? I mean, should a parent be scared of getting diagnosed with autism?
Oh, no. Okay. There's a lot of layers to that question. So I have 2 autistic kids. The way you use that word autistic mom implies that I have autism and I actually don't. So I just want to be clear about the fact that I've raised 2 sons who are autistic. They're lovely people. They are in their mid-20s now. They're very nice people. I love them. And they help me with all sorts of things. They're just very sweet people. So
I just want all my viewers to listen to this very carefully, that Sarah herself has raised 2 autistic children and they are doing really good in their life.
They are.
So no need to get scared. Just get early diagnosis done so that you can help your children as fast as you can.
Yes. There's another piece to it, though, which is that they also are who they are. So as I said earlier, there are things I was able to help them with, and there are some things it's just how they are, and I haven't been able to help with that. And so we've worked out strategies for working around it. So like my younger son has he has fine motor problems, and so writing is very hard for him. So he types. Most people type now anyway, so it just doesn't matter. But we've figured out strategies for each of them that make it easier for them to be in the world. So like my older son, actually, he cannot hear in one ear, and his other ear, the hearing is definitely not totally great. And so he has a hearing aid, and he definitely has to see your mouth while you're talking so he can understand you. And he's learned to read lips. And so that's how he processes speech when he's in, in a loud, noisy environment, which is very hard for him. And so there are lots of little strategies that we've learned that have helped them be able to function. But we have to acknowledge the reality of what they're dealing with and figure out strategies to help them navigate the world.
Yeah. So I can go on and on. This is a beautiful topic, and thank you for sharing all these things. My favorite part is here, I just request you to share a few tips to deal with autistic children, how to handle them, how to be with them, how to talk to them, how to make them things do. So a few tips.
Yes. All right. Tip number one, and the most important one, love your child. So just make sure they know how much you love them, right? Make sure they know that you love them for who they are.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing. All the other stuff, you can figure it out. Something that happens to parents of autistic kids is they move into what I call fix-it mode, where they're trying to fix everything about their child. And the message the child gets is not, I am capable of learning and I can do, amazing things. Instead, what they learn is, I'm broken and we're always working on fixing me. And that's a hard message for a kid. So it's really important that they know you love them for who they are, and that it's your job as a parent to help them figure out how to navigate the world, right? So it's both things, but it's not that you think they're broken. It's that we need to figure out how to move through the world. The world isn't a kind place. It isn't a kind place. And so we do have to help our children figure out how to be in the world and navigate challenges. That's just part of life. And that can be very challenging when you have a child with autism. The other thing I wanted to say is that a lot of kids when they're younger are very sensitive. They're very sensitive. So they react in a big way to something that to you seems like no big deal. I think empathizing with them and saying, whoa, like that clearly upset you. So validating that they are having an experience, even if you don't understand it, validate that they're having that experience. And then you can, usually it takes a while for them to calm down, and just remember that they can't learn until they feel better, right? So if they have a big reaction and they're very upset, you just need to be calm and have them calm down to your calmness. That's called co-regulation, right? So they calm down, you stay there as the calm presence for them. And then once they truly are calm, then they can learn, okay, what happened back there? Why was that upsetting? Was it a loud noise? Was it that you felt criticized? Was it too hard for you? Like, what went wrong there? What was the problem? And then try to brainstorm how to do it differently next time.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you for sharing all the things with us. And I want all the viewers, whoever wants to contact you, Sarah, go and reach out to her through her website and email address, which I'll be putting in the description box. And I'll be putting all the resources in the description box, especially her books, newly books, which she has just finished. And I am really grateful for all the tips and strategies which you shared. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a